I'm going to talk to you tonight about belief, specifically the problem of religious belief. Our world has been balkanized into separate moral communities. We have Christians against Muslims, against Jews. The majority of people on this planet at the moment organize their lives around a founding proposition that God wrote one of their books. We have many of these books on hand. They make genuinely incompatible claims about the nature of this universe, about the disposition of certain real estate in the Middle East. We have the marriage of quite literally first century or earlier beliefs, literally Iron Age philosophy, with 21st century destructive technology. This on its face should seem untenable to us. So now I'm going to say some very unpleasant things about religious belief over the next hour. And I just want to warn you up front that I know I'm going to offend some people in this room. Let me assure you that's not the point. I'm not being deliberately provocative. I am simply worried. We've all assimilated this idea that we should respect other people's religious beliefs. Your neighbor has the right to believe whatever he wants to about God and the moral structure to this universe. He has the right to believe whatever he wants to about what happens after death, and you should respect these beliefs merely because he believes them. Where else in our discourse do we play by these rules? When was the last time anyone in this room was admonished to respect another person's beliefs about history or geography or engineering or medicine? We do not respect people's beliefs. We evaluate their reasons. If my reasons are good enough, you will helplessly believe what I believe. That is what it is to be a rational human being. Reasons are contagious. If I came on this stage and said that the Holocaust never happened, you would be under no burden whatsoever to respect my beliefs. We don't respect the beliefs of people who think Elvis is still alive, the people who make all those crazy pilgrimages to Graceland. These people do not get invited to sit on our boards of directors. They don't become presidents of universities. That is all well and good, except when you change the subject to God, and then all bets are off. Then the sky's the limit. You can be certain with zero evidence and respected for it. It is taboo to push the conversation into criticism of your beliefs. So what I'm advocating, really, and what I advocate in my book, is a kind of conversational intolerance. We don't need new laws. We don't have laws against Holocaust deniers. All we need is a standard of intellectual honesty, where people who pretend to be certain about things they're clearly not certain about receive some conversational pressure. This would all be accomplished if we treated everyone who spoke about God on the floor of the Senate as though they had just spoke about Poseidon. Just imagine, we have all these hurricanes in the Gulf, and some senator gets it into his head that we should really be praying to Poseidon. This, after all, is his jurisdiction. The ocean is reclaiming our cities. Clearly, that would be the end of that person's political career. Yet it's not like someone discovered in the 3rd century that the biblical God exists, but Poseidon doesn't. These claims have exactly the same status. If Jesus does come down out of the clouds like a superhero, Christianity will stand revealed as a science. That will be the science of Christianity. Every Christian will be able to say, "Told you so." Here he is, look at his magic powers. And a sufficient display of magic powers, it would just take a few minutes, would convince any scientist of the claims of Christianity. World. Just contemplate for a moment the biographies of the 19 men who woke up on September 11th, 2001 and decided to slit the throats of stewardesses and fly planes into buildings. These guys were college educated to a man. Many of them had PhDs. Many of them had been educated in the West. They were middle class or better. I don't know how many architects and engineers need to hit the wall at 400 miles an hour for us to get it into our heads that this is not merely a problem of education or economics. These were not guys who had spent a lot of time agitating about regime change in the Middle East. These were guys who spent an inordinate amount of time at their local mosque in Hamburg talking about the pleasures that await martyrs in paradise and demonizing infidel culture. The circumstance we are in is much more sinister than many want to realize. It is possible to be so well educated that you can build a nuclear bomb and to still think you're going to get the 72 virgins in paradise. That is how partitioned the human mind is, and that is how balkanized our discourse is. That is how immune religious propositions are to critical pressure, conversational pressure in our discourse. 40% of scientists believe in a biblical God. That does not suggest that there are good scientific reasons to believe in a biblical God. That suggests that 60% of scientists are not doing their jobs. There really is an argument to be won here. Another problem with religious moderation is that it is intellectually bankrupt. It really represents a fundamentally unprincipled use of reason. At least fundamentalists talk about evidence. You ask a fundamentalist, why do you believe that Jesus was the Son of God and the Bible is the perfect Word of God? You'll get reasons. They're not good reasons, but you will immediately see that these people are engaged in an evidentiary pursuit. They'll say things like, the New Testament confirms all of Old Testament prophecy, or every prophecy in the Bible has come true. These are specious claims, but contrast that to what moderates say. Moderates don't talk about evidence. Moderates talk about meaning. They talk about the good effects of believing as they do. Now, just take that kind of talk into another area. Just change God to some other consoling proposition and appreciate what a non sequitur that is as to the question, why do you believe in God? This is actually an example from my book. Imagine your neighbor believes that he's got a diamond buried in his backyard that's the size of a refrigerator. Okay, and you ask him why. And he says things like, well, you don't understand. This diamond gives my life a lot of meaning. Or, my family loves the gatherings we have on the lawn digging this pit every Sunday. And are we going to take that away from us? Or imagine if he said, I wouldn't want to live in a universe where there wasn't a diamond buried in my backyard that's the size of a refrigerator. It's pretty clear, it's immediately clear, that those responses would be inadequate. Deeply inadequate. Those really are the responses of a madman or an idiot. And yet, take the same kind of thinking into the religious domain, and these responses have immense prestige. In fact, unless you endorsed some thinking of that kind, you could not possibly get elected to political office in this country. But I got news for you. I've read the books. God is not a moderate. What you find in these books, there's no place in the books where God says, when you get to the New World and you develop your 3 branches of government and you have a civil society, you can just jettison all the barbarism I recommended in the first books. These books really are engines of fundamentalism. They are engines of intolerance. There really is a wrathful Jesus in the New Testament waiting to be found in 2 Thessalonians and in Revelation, where exactly the Jesus who we have in the Left Behind series of novels that 60 million people have bought. The Jesus of just fiery wrath who's going to throw people into the pit. Okay, that is there to be discovered. Nowhere in the book does it say, well, that's bogus. This is not an accident, and it's perfectly reasonable. We have this idea that the fact that we were burning heretics alive for 5 centuries in Europe, this represented some kind of departure, a civilizational departure into psychopathology. It didn't. It is perfectly reasonable to do this if you believe the books. I mean, the heretic next door, given certain beliefs, is far more dangerous than the child molester next door. The heretic can say something to your child that will damn his soul for all time. The truth is that not even, just to speak specifically of the Bible for a moment, not even an Orthodox Jew or a fundamentalist Christian can take God at his word, given how sadistic God is in books like Leviticus and Deuteronomy and Exodus. I mean, if you were going to draw your to-do list out of a book like Leviticus, you would make Mullah Omar of the Taliban look like Franklin Delano Roosevelt. I mean, it's just, it paints a vision of life so needlessly horrible, so subversive of the basic project of creating a sustainable society where human happiness is even possible, that we effectively have edited the Bible. Even fundamentalists have. But it's important to point out that nobody ever says these passages are immoral. I mean, the idea that you find that a woman is not a virgin on her wedding night and you stone her to death. You stone homosexuals to death. If your kids talk back to you, you stone them to death. If you go into a town and you see someone praying to a foreign god, you kill him, you kill his family, you kill everyone in the town. Okay, these are not metaphors. These are not analogies for some spiritual struggle within. These are explicit directives to kill people for theological crimes. No one ever says this is immoral. Christians just say we don't have to do this anymore because Jesus brought us the doctrine of grace. Well, incidentally, Jesus also said that every jot and every tittle of the law has to be fulfilled. So the inquisitors of the Middle Ages had a rationale for practicing this kind of law. And I can assure you that St. Augustine and St. Thomas Aquinas had read the Sermon on the Mount. They managed to square the ministry of Jesus with their impulses to kill people for thought crimes. If the Bible is the best book we have in the West, in ethical terms, we should be practicing slavery. The Creator of the universe clearly expects us to keep slaves. He simply tells us not to beat our slaves so severely that we put out their eyes or their teeth. Jesus clearly expected us to keep slaves. He never criticizes the institution of slavery. He uses analogies with slaves. Paul, in 1 Timothy, admonishes slaves to serve their masters well and to serve their Christian masters especially well, so that they can partake in their holiness. The abolitionists were absolutely on the wrong side of the theological debate. If this is the wisest book we have, the slaveholders of the South were right. And on so many other questions this is true. If this is the wisest book we have, we should be beating our children with rods. It says in Proverbs. Incidentally, fundamentalist Christians in our country are beating their children with rods. Last year alone, in Alabama, 40,000 kids were paddled in their schools. It's legal to do this. This is a faith-based initiative. You can put your faith in a 21st century conversation about ethics, or you can put your faith in a first century conversation as preserved in these books. I mean, you hear religious people say things like, there's nothing you can say that will change my mind. I mean, just imagine that said in medicine. If there's nothing that can be said that will change your mind, if there's no evidence or argument that can be adduced, that proves that you are not taking any state of the world into account in your beliefs. The problem with this is that when the stakes are high, we have a choice between conversation and violence. At the level of society, we have a choice between conversation, negotiation, and war. The only willingness to take on and consider new evidence and new argument guarantees that this human collaboration is open-ended. Only that willingness guarantees that. Religion is the one area of discourse where we have made a fetish of a very different frame of mind.
One of the questions I'm asked most frequently in interviews is, and I've been asked it many times, what's to prevent you from going out and committing murder if you don't believe in God? What do you say to people who insist that there can never be any morality without religion?
Well, yeah, as you say, this is an incredibly common question, and we're all wise to prepare an answer for it. I happen to have one. I mean, one counterpoint to this suspicion is, if you just look at the societies where there's the least homicide, the least violent crime, these really are the most atheistic societies on the planet. I mean, if you just look at the UN Development Index, which ranks societies by violent crime, by literacy, by educational attainment, by per capita income, without exception, apart from the presence of the United States somewhere in the top 20, these are the most atheistic societies on the planet. Societies like the Netherlands and Canada and Australia, Sweden. There is no evidence whatsoever that high levels of religious adherence leads to a moral society. In fact, if you look at within our own culture, if you look at the red state, blue state divide, where are most of the murders occurring? Where are most of the teen pregnancies even, and even the abortions? These are happening in those states that have the highest level of religious adherence.
How do you restart a conversation with someone who says, nothing you can say will change my mind?
Oh, it's hard. I've been on AM radio enough to know that there are people who you can't talk to. I mean, it's really, there are people, there are doctrines that are hermetically sealed, where the person like me who's going to challenge the belief has been demonized in advance as a temptation. I mean, the moment you start to sound reasonable enough so as to shake someone's faith, you are suspected of being the Antichrist. I mean, they are prepared for a sufficiently alluring counterpoint to their dogma. So it's and in the Muslim world, this is also, I think it's a deeper problem actually, because the taboos around criticizing faith are literally enforced by capital punishment in so many Muslim countries. I mean, you take your life in your hands, making the noises I'm making in any Muslim community on this planet, and it's not just in the Middle East. And we're talking in a suburb of New York. It is not this kind of conversation is not being had in the Muslim world, and it's we have to find some way to inspire it. But it's how we do that is a genuine problem.
I think we'll close with this question. Seems to me very important. What practical steps can we take as individuals in our individual lives to bring about the conversational intolerance you advocate?
Well, it's interesting because I'm not actually recommending that we just oppose every claim to religious conviction wherever we find it. I'm not recommending that in a closed elevator you hear someone talk about Jesus and you unleash on them. It's really just in situations like this. As a start, I think when you're at the podium or when you're writing an editorial or an opinion piece for the newspaper, or you're in a situation where you are advancing the conversation about ideas, it seems to me that we all have a moral responsibility to be deeply honest about these things. And so I'm not advocating that we all rush back and destroy every Thanksgiving dinner over these issues. But And then who knows where it would go from there. I mean, there's room certainly for being civil and just turning the other cheek.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much.